Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the third annual 2024 Field of 68 live mock draft. We are going to be taking the next 90 minutes here to go through every single one of the first round picks with my panel of experts and Jeff Goodman that I have here. There will be 30 draft picks. Each of us have 5 picks that we are going to be making. We're going to figure it out on the fly. Who's going to be picking as if they are that team? Who's going to be picking as if they are the actual expert, where the GM should be listening to them? But it's going to be fun. There's always a couple of random picks that throw people for a loop here. Let me introduce my panel. I've got Sam Vecenie, host of the Game Theory podcast and a writer covering the NBA draft, and college basketball for The Athletic, and I guess now the New York Times. He's also known in these streets as Melbourne's finest. I have Jonathan Wasserman, Bleacher Report's leading draft expert, and the guy that is trying to hijack my bid to lead the Devin Carter hype train into next week's draft. I have Corey Tulaba, a self-proclaimed NBA draft dude and one of the draft experts from No Ceilings, a website and the YouTube channel of Nothing But Draft Junkies. You guys got to go check those guys out if you haven't already. I have Adam Finkelstein here, who covers recruiting, college hoops, and the draft for CBS Sports and 24/7 Sports, and is only here to ensure that we have at least one guy from the Northeast that actually has his head on his shoulders. And lastly, we have Jeff Goodman, who spent the last 15 minutes watching YouTube videos and now thinks that he is one of the foremost leading NBA draft experts. I want to start you guys off with this.
Before we get to the draft. That was Bill Simmons in an actual draft. Prior to the draft, I was there.
Well, look, you know what? You and Bill Simmons right on the same wavelength there. Sam, I want to start you off with this. What do you make of this draft as a whole?
Yeah, I don't love it at the top. I think it's particularly pretty weak at the top in terms of like superstar potential talent. Undoubtedly, there will be all-stars that emerge, but there's just a lot more uncertainty at the top than what we've seen previously. What my favorite range is of this class, though, is probably that, 8 to 22 range, 8 to 18, something in that ballpark, where I think you will see some guys really hit in this group. I particularly really like the guards in this class, guys like Bub Carrington, Jared McCain. I think that there are really, really high-level players, and I'm not convinced that Wasserman is the highest person on Devin Carter in this room right now.
Fink, give me a guy that you are higher on than anybody else heading into this draft.
So a month ago, I would have said Devin Carter, but clearly that's becoming a popular opinion. But I'm going to go with Ron Holland. He was the guy that coming out of high school we pegged as the number one prospect in the class, and I get the reservations about it just in terms of the shooting efficiency and some of the assist turnover stuff. But to me, he's a good sized wing. He's an athlete. He's a hyper competitor. I mean, to be around this guy is to understand that. I just don't see a bust outcome in the potential range of things that could happen. I think he's just going to will his way into being a very good NBA player, potentially have much better outcomes than people are expecting. So he's someone that I'm certainly higher on than most.
Jonathan, you had a tweet earlier today where you said if there's going to be somebody that sneaks into the top 5 of this draft that people don't expect, it's going to be Cody Williams. Kind of break down your thought process and why you believe he has a chance to be a riser next Wednesday night.
Yeah, I think he kind of has that archetype that everybody loves, the big wing, 6'9", 7'1" wingspan for defense. He was super efficient this year, despite the fact that he's clearly raw, which tells you that, he obviously has room to improve, but even if he doesn't, he still kind of finds ways to impact the game off the ball without needing dribbles, without needing ISO, kind of guys like OG and Jaden McDaniels, who are not go-to offensive guys, but worst case scenario, they're kind of, impact 3-and-D guys. And that's kind of seems like a floor for him. And just talking around to NBA guys, I think he's the most asked prospect I get is, what do you think of Cody Williams? It seems like teams are maybe trying to talk themselves into him. And I think it doesn't hurt the fact that his brother is Jay Williams, and we've seen the development with him, and maybe it happens with his brother Cody.
All right, Corey, I'm gonna put you on the spot here. I want your guy in the 20s, maybe in the early second round. Who is going to be the sleeper that pops out of nowhere and ends up being an all-star out of this draft? Go all in on someone. If you got to put all the chips in the middle, who's it going to be? Late 20s, early second round.
Jonathan Mobo from San Francisco. I think that he is one of the more unique prospects in this class. 6'7", measuring with 7'2" wingspan, has real guard skills. One of these guys who is a late growth spurt guy. If you look at the way the game is played now and you get guys who are allowed to grab and go and lead the break, make plays for teammates, but can also finish themselves or run DHOs, find guys cutting backdoor, he's a jump shot away. And if that jump shot comes around, then I think he can be pretty special. I mean, if you look at his blend of athleticism and skill, I think he's got a real shot to provide some pretty immense value as, a potential sleeper. Another guy, he also played really well in the combine. And, he told me he's not somebody that ducks smoke. He wants to just go out there, play basketball and prove what he can do. And I think he's somebody that, in the right situation can really make a name for himself.
Another guy that doesn't duck smoke is Jeff Goodman. You have some things you want to say about the top of this draft class, Jeff. Go ahead. The floor is yours. Make it quick.
I mean, like Sam said, it's not great at the top. Let's face it. Like whoever the number one pick is in a really good draft, they're probably going somewhere in the 8 to 12 range. But I do think the depth isn't that different. When you get to 15 to 30, I don't think it's that different than any other draft we've had over the last 5 or 10 years. The guy that I'm higher on the most is Stephon Castle. I just love him because, again, you know what you're going to get out of him defensively, right? I mean, we start with UConn. You know what you're going to get out of him as far as being just a locked-in team guy who's all about the right things and winning. I think he can play both guard spots. And I think, again, when you talk to the NBA guys, what do they say? If you're in the gym, your shot's going to get better. That's clearly the weakness in his game right now. But if he lives in the gym, that can get better. And I think Castle can be as impactful as almost any guy in this draft.
All right. It's time to do it, fellas. It's time to go into the 2024 Field of 68 live first round mock draft. On the clock is the new GM of the Atlanta Hawks, one Samuel Vecenie. Sam, fix Trae Young for me. Go.
So again, you kind of said at the top here, we're just drafting based off of what I would do and not what the team will do here, right? That's kind of what you said there.
Yes.
You could do whatever you want. It's your world, Sam.
No, I like that. I think that's the way we go here.
Okay. So I would take Alex Sarr, number one. The reason that I would take Alex Sarr, number one, is in today's NBA, I think that every NBA champion at this point for the next, era of basketball in the league is going to have some sort of 5-out look offensively. And while Alex Sarr's offense is very theoretical right now, he has a chance to be a player that is in the Evan Mobley mode on defense, who can cover a lot of ground, be a real weak side rim protector, but on offense can also hopefully at some point step away, space the floor as a shooter, as well as, be able to short roll the pass, occasionally attack closeouts. I really think that we just saw in the NBA Finals a team in Boston that had no problem putting Jason Tatum on somebody like a Daniel Gafford or a Derek Lively, and then just basically leaving the center alone and using Tatum as a help defender. It's really hard to do that if a big can shoot. And I believe in Sarr's shot to an extent to where I think it's going to be hard to leave him alone out there, at least. I think he's going to continue to get better in that respect. And look, I think if we're just kind of looking at it through the construct of modern basketball, I really, really think that, Alex Sarr has a chance to be the guy with the highest upside in this class.
Jonathan, you agree?
I could see why anybody would think he has the highest upside in the class. Like I totally get it. He has, star defensive ceiling, and the Mobley comparison is pretty good. That's the one I use for him most often, at least in terms of kind of, the physical tools and the highlights and what he can do right now. The question is, what is he going to be able to do consistently at the next level? And again, we can bank on the defense. Like I can't see any scenario where he's not an impact defender and probably pretty soon. I just don't know if I have enough confidence in any of his strengths offensively, from the shot to putting it down on the floor to even finishing. Sometimes he's a little weak around the basket against, tougher shot blockers. But yeah, of course, he's just turned 19, I think. And if he puts it all together, and there's a little bit of guesswork, I think, in terms of how quickly it's going to come together and how sharp he's going to be as a shooter and how effective he's going to be as a ball handler. I think he's just a little too far away offensively for me at number one. But in this draft, there's just not a lot of sure things or obvious stars. And so I totally get why a team would take him number one.
Yeah, there's no Wemby sitting out there for number one. With the number
Who are you
2
taking
pick
at one?
on the clock.
Who are you taking at one? Quickly.
I'm taking Ron Holland at number one, but nobody seems to be on that same page with me.
Interesting.
Man, we should have given him the number 1 pick in this exercise. That would have been a lot of fun. All right, the number 2 pick, the Washington Wizards. Corey, you're up. We'll see what happens. If you go with the most recent no ceilings mock draft, we could have some fireworks here with the number 2 pick.
Well, I don't want to play to the crowd here, but I'm going to take a UConn guy at number 2. I'm going to take Donovan Clingan. Donovan Clingan is my number 1 guy personally. And I just think the dude is so good at basketball and a winner at every level. I think Washington is in a pretty good position that they do not have to kind of look at roster construction, because to me, they pretty much have one guy who I would be looking at as a core piece going forward in Bilal Coulibaly. But if you put Coulibaly and Donovan Clingan together, defensively, I think you have a really, really strong start there. And then offensively, I think that, the passing that Clingan showed this year, finding cutters, that kind of feel, nearly 2-to-1 assist to turnover ratio at 7'3", along with being a lob threat. I just think that there are some real untapped potential there as an offensive player as well. Obviously they need to get a lead initiator, and I think that would obviously help with a whole lot of things, but they don't need to be good right away. There are a lot of guys in next year's draft that can, make that problem go away. So to me, you take the best player on the floor, a guy that I think, as long as he stays healthy, is undoubtedly going to be a great NBA basketball player. If he shoots it eventually, great. That would be awesome. But even if he doesn't, I still think that he is going to provide a ton of value. And, I think as he evolves as a player, you're looking at a guy who could be a little Marc Gasol-ish. So in this particular draft, just go get the best guy on the board, and that's Donovan Clingan for me.
Fink, you agree?
Pretty
I know
easily.
you have takes on UConn guys.
Yeah, I mean, Donovan in particular, I've been watching him live since he was, I think, 15 years old, growing up about 30 minutes from me. And the thing that I tell people all the time is that the work he did from a conditioning standpoint when he first got to UConn was expected. I mean, the level to which he changed his body really just completely altered his path. And you saw it a little bit again this year, albeit to a lesser extent. But, I think, Rob, you and I were sitting next to each other in Madison Square Garden when they were playing Illinois. And he did not look good. He wasn't healthy. He was about 20 pounds heavier than he finished the season up at. They shut him down shortly thereafter for a few games. Then he came back and finally got healthy and played his best basketball this season. So I completely agree that he has some untapped offensive potential. In fact, when he was in high school, that was one of the things that I was most intrigued with, was his hands, his natural touch. I think you saw the evolution of him as a passer this year. I think that's something we don't talk enough about. Like, for someone that size to be able to read slips and throw backdoor passes off the dribble, that's not a normal thing. So, but I also agree that durability is going to be a key factor here. He's got to stay at that ideal playing weight. We saw that this year. He's got to be totally healthy, because when either of those things fluctuate, that's when his impact can start to be inconsistent.
Yeah, I'm buying the upside as a passer. I think he reads the game better than a lot of people expect. The 3rd pick, Houston Rockets. Jonathan, that's going to you. Every single one of you guys has the same guy going with the 3rd pick here. Are you going to go off script? Are you going to change what everybody else has?
Well, you think I would after I just said Ron Holland was my top prospect. I mean, I might fire myself just based on how this really doesn't make sense logically, but I'm not going to take Ron Holland. That kind of just talks to the point of like how close it is at the top, where fit really does, I think, play a factor, and where I would take Ron Holland if I was the Hawks, because they have 2 high-level creators there. I don't love him for Houston at 3. I really do love Reed Sheppard like everybody else. And, I think the narrative with Reed Sheppard always is, he's kind of a safe play, kind of a connector type, but does he have upside? And I'm going to kind of bet on the track record of Kentucky guys who just look better, look freer at the NBA level. And I guess first you have to talk about, of course, what he does well and what's going to translate. And, how can you not bet on the shooting? The numbers were ridiculous in every single category, not just, spot up, but off the dribble, free throws. The touch shots on runners, I think, is telling. A high IQ guy. I love the passing IQ. I don't know if he's going to be, a lead point guard in the NBA, but I do think it becomes an asset, his ability to move the ball and hit the right guys. I think when you picture his fit with Houston, I mean, I'm thinking long-term here, and I'm thinking Amen Thompson is going to be the primary ball handler there. And I couldn't think of a kind of better match of complementary skills with Amen being able to guard bigger guards, 2 guards realistically, and Reed Sheppard gets to guard the point guards, and you have the high-level creator in Amen. And maybe that's not the strength of Reed Sheppard's. So that's a nice compliment. And of course, Amen is not a great shooter. And then you have Reed to stretch the floor. I just kind of love that pairing there. They kind of help each other out with their weaknesses. But again, I'm taking Sheppard 3 overall also because I think there's a lot more creativity in his game than he was able to show, just like, the handful of other stars in the NBA now who came from Kentucky and weren't as, I guess, impressive in college off the dribble. And I went back and watched some high school tape of Reed, and man, there were some plays where he really does show some bursts, some wiggle and shake off the dribble. And everything I hear about him off the floor from interviews, 10 out of 10, A+ kid, somebody you just want to bet on maximizing his potential. I think you take all of that into consideration along with his fit, and I'm totally good with Reed Sheppard at number 3.
Goodman, you got about 20 seconds here. I know you love Reed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can go wrong with him. I think he's just, that type of all-around player that, again, to me, when you're drafting at the top right now, you want a guy that you can rely on. You don't wing and miss right now, and you're not going to miss on Reed Sheppard.
All right. With the number 4 pick, we are going to the Spurs, and we are going to Adam Finkelstein, who is going to be drafting for Greg Popovich. Is it going to be 2 UConn guys in the top 4, Fink? What do you say?
No, it's not. It's going to be Zachary Rissache. It's going to be 2 Frenchmen. That's what it's going to be. I think when you've got Wemby, I think it's got to be about surrounding him with ideal pieces. And I think spacing is such a important part of modern day offense, and the correlation between shooting and spacing is obvious. San Antonio is a team that's got some significant holes to build around here. And because I think, especially in the second half of the season, Wemby showed that he was personally ready to impact a contender maybe sooner than some expected. Rissache is someone who, I'm not really sure what the upside is. I'm not sure that he's got outcomes where he's a primary creator, which is somewhat counterintuitive for someone who is now being talked about as a potential top overall pick. But what we know is he's got really good perimeter size. I think he's going to be able to go back and forth between a big wing and a stretch 4. He's got a really good-looking shooting stroke. I know the numbers have varied throughout the course of the year, but I think that's really projectable and probably his primary offensive asset. And then defensively, he's going to be able to hold his own as well. Now, some of his recent testing at the combine athletically and in terms of his length, that left a little something to be desired. But I think there's some familiarity there because of, the fact that he is French. And I just think the shooting next to Wemby is going to be so important, as well as the fact that he can play the 3 and the 4. And the other thing I'd add, just kind of as a side point here, is if he shoots the ball to the extent to which he's capable of and really becomes a total driller out there, now all of a sudden you've got maybe a way that Jeremy Sohan can better coexist in that lineup. They did a lot of funky things with him last year. They started him at the point guard to start the season. And, I've always kind of been of the opinion that his best position was at the 4. He kind of settled back in there at the end of the year. So I just think Rissache fits with everything they have there. And I think this would be a really ideal scenario for San Antonio with what you hear they are prioritizing right now.
Sam, I know you've watched a lot of Rissache tape. What do you make of him? What do you make of his upside?
Yeah, look, I'm kind of with Adam that I don't know what the upside is necessarily. Like watching him, kind of reminds me of, just in terms of what his role is, like older, like Nick Batum, where he wasn't super athletic anymore and could shoot it and clearly played with good feel and was clearly like a really good defender, but probably a guy that's best out there is like a, fourth or fifth best player on the court that isn't going to take anything off of the court, but will probably provide value in that role because of his size, his length, his shooting ability. Those guys do help you win games. And I think it's in this draft, if you really just want to come away with somebody that you feel comfortable with, I don't really have a problem with Ricochet here. I would probably take Steph Castle, but I go back and forth on whether or not this is the right call for San Antonio or not. I think it's a reasonable pick.
All right. The fifth pick in this draft is the Detroit Pistons, and Jeff Goodman is going to be drafting for the Detroit Pistons. So this is where things probably are going to go entirely off the rails. Buckle up, Jeff. What do you got for us?
I mean, I want to go Castle in the worst way, but he just doesn't fit with Detroit as much as, to me, Dalton Connect fits, right? I mean, they need a shooter desperately to play along with Cade Cunningham. Jaden Ivey was pretty good down the stretch, but I mean, this team was atrocious. Troy Weaver's had so many misses. They replace him. Now they got a guy in Trajan Langdon who hopefully can draft a little bit. And I think he goes with the safe pick of Dalton Connect that, again, gives Cade a little bit of a running mate. Dalton Connect was probably the second best player in college basketball last year. And he showed he could carry a team. And he showed he could score from all three levels. A lot tougher than we thought he was going to be coming in from Northern Colorado. Shot at almost 40% from three. So to me, this is kind of a no-brainer in a sense because, again, I don't think you're going to miss on Dalton Connect. I think we know what he can do at worst case scenario. He's a really good offensive piece in a team in which, again, they don't have a lot of guys who can make shots from the perimeter.
Corey, when we did our draft profile of Dalton Connect, I said that he was one of the safest picks in this draft because you're getting something between a Grayson Allen and a Doug McDermott. What do you make of those comparisons, and what do you make of Dalton Connect long-term in the league?
I feel like Dalton maybe is a little bit stronger physically than those guys. I mean, I think stylistically, he certainly can play that role. I think maybe he might even have a little more on-ball juice. And I think that putting him in Detroit, I think that's something he can unlock next to Cade. And I think if you're going to take him at 5, he needs to have a little bit more on-ball juice than, the role that Grayson and Doug has kind of settled into. So I think that, another outcome could be a guy like Max Strus. That's certainly something there. But yeah, I mean, looking at his fit next to Cade, I think ending up on the spectrum of a Doug McDermott, Grayson Allen is probably not the value you want at pick 5. I think you kind of have to shoot a little bit higher. And honestly, I think his potential is higher than that. So, I mean, I love it. It's not the direction I'd have gone necessarily because I think that the only guy the Pistons actually should be focused on keeping happy on this roster is Cade Cunningham. I think everybody else is expendable in some way, especially with a new front office and a new coach coming in. But yeah, Cade and Dalton connect, and Cade's getting a little bit older. Dalton kind of fits his timeline, so I certainly see the fit. I think they would be a pretty strong duo going forward. And God, they need shooting around all of their non-shooters, so it at least solves that problem.
Yeah, I think Dalton is also one of my favorite stories in this draft. A guy that was 6 foot when he was, I believe, a junior in high school, goes to JUCO, has 2 offers coming out of JUCO, goes to Northern Colorado. As a junior in college, is averaging 9 points a game in Northern Colorado, blows up as a senior, gets a 5th year, goes to Tennessee, is the second best player in college basketball, and here he is as a guy that probably is not going to drop out of the top 10 on draft day. Love stories like that. It's now my pick, and I get the honor of drafting for the Charlotte Hornets, who basically have an entirely new front office and coach and entirely new situation going on over there, which, when you look at it, when I look at it, I can kind of squint my eyes and see a pretty decent core of, I can't believe I'm about to say this, and you guys are going to laugh at me, of LaMelo Ball, Mark Williams, and Brandon Miller. I feel like those 3 right there, at least on paper, look pretty good. And what you need next to them is, I think you need defense and you need shooting. Now, when I wrote down the best fits that you could pick for Charlotte in this spot, I had Dalton Connect, Reed Shepherd, and Steph Castle. Obviously, Steph Castle isn't the shooter, but when you're coming off a season where you won 21 games, I don't think you're quite in a spot where you're going to be that picky when it comes to who you're drafting. You know, you want upside here, and I think Steph Castle probably has the highest upside of anybody left on the board. Love the way he guards. I think he brings a winning mentality that Charlotte doesn't necessarily have, a competitive mentality that I think Charlotte probably could use in their locker room. And I'm going to buy the jump shot long-term because I think the kid is a worker, and I think that he's going to find a way to be able to make this thing work. Fink, I'm going to go to you next on this one. What do you make of Castle's fit on Charlotte? And is this the direction that you would go if you were Jeff Peterson in this spot?
Yeah, it is. I think, the defensive identity is a really important one and a really valuable one next to Ball. I think, for all the talk, and I think we've all participated in it, about whether or not he's a point guard, he's certainly going to have some on-off ball versatility, going to be able to, at minimum, play pick and roll on the second side of the floor, have better opportunities to get downhill on the second side of the floor, which is very much what we saw this year at UConn. The shooting to me is an interesting variable. I was really concerned about the shooting coming out of high school, and I thought there was more of a mental component to it than we ended up seeing. I know that a lot of UConn's opponents this year defended him very much in the way that they did Andre Jackson at times this year, but Castle really stuck with his shot. He didn't show a hesitation to shoot it. So I was pleased. I know this is going to sound somewhat weird, but I was pleased with like the mental part of it, even though the percentages weren't good, that he never seemed to lose confidence. Because Rob, when I tell you I saw this guy miss 8 straight free throws in an AAU game once during the July Live period, and Dan was sitting right there, I mean, it was like some Nick Anderson type stuff. And so I was really concerned about just like the mental part of shooting the basketball, but there were no signs of that this year at UConn. And if he does become someone who can make shots, it's going to unlock all types of really positive outcomes. So I think this is a really good pick.
Yeah, Jonathan, you got about 20 seconds here. What is Castle's upside? What's his ceiling as a player?
So that's why these conversations are the best, because like I don't see the upside that other people see. Now I like Castle. I just can't picture like the creation translating to a high level, and then the shooting, like so much has to go right. I see a Josh Hart type of player. And by the way, nothing wrong with taking Josh Hart. I think earlier in this draft, I see a guy who's going to, attack physically downhill, move the ball, crash the offensive glass, guard the team's best wing. But on the ball, I don't see all the upside. But I do see a very good fit, and I really do like him in Charlotte between LaMelo and Brandon Miller.
All right, pick number 7. We are heading back to our resident Australian, Sam Vecenie. Portland Trailblazers on the clock. What are you doing here, Sam?
Yeah, I'm going to go Cody Williams. 6'6.5", 7'1" wingspan. I think that more than anything, this team just needs to keep taking shots on wings who can play next to guys like Scoot Henderson, Anthony Simons potentially, and Shaedon Sharpe. And I think just continuing to take flyers on these guys is probably the right approach for this front office. Portland's track record under this, front office of Joe Cronin, who was there under Neil Olshey previously, was quite strong, taking guys that are a little bit underdeveloped physically and continuing to allow them to grow and mature in terms of what they're capable of. With Cody Williams particularly, I think before his ankle injury and before he had all of those little like nicks that he kind of picked up throughout the course of the season, starting in January, where like he broke his nose and had a couple of things happen to him. He was among the most productive freshmen in the country. He was averaging like 15 points, 4 or 5 rebounds, couple of assists per game, and really looked like the confident rim attacking player that every NBA team would love to see as a wing. And I think his shooting confidence improved this year. This is a guy that like took very, very few pull-up jumpers in high school basketball, for instance, and he got much better at this over the course of his season at Colorado. And then finally, again, like to me, name of the game in today's NBA is ground coverage defensively and hopefully being able to find like shot creators and floor spacers on offense. And this is an upside swing. Again, like I'm just willing to take the flyer on Cody Williams being able to grow into a dribble, pass, shoot, defend 6'6" wing with a 7'1" wingspan.
Goodman, are you worried about the fact that he is a guy that did not have a ton of production in college and you are drafting him at this high in the draft?
No, because again, the way this draft is, he's going to be a good piece. Like there's no question. Is he an alpha dog? No, not that's probably never what he's going to be. But again, he can be a really good piece like his brother is in Oklahoma City. Like that's to me kind of how I project him. If he can average, 14, 15, be a really good defender, he's able to move the ball. He's just, again, I hate to say it, but in this draft, I think you want safe picks. I actually think Cody Williams is far safer than what Sam's given him credit for. I don't think he's as much of a risk.
Corey, what do you make of, you got about 20 seconds here. What do you make of Cody Williams, and what do you make of his fit with Portland?
I'm a big fan, and he is the kind of player that they love. You look at how many rangy, kind of gadgety forwards that they have. He fits the MO, and he's certainly somebody worth taking a swing on. You look at his body, you look at his brother's body, and how he's developed physically. If you think Cody can get to that point, I mean, this is a guy where the sky is the limit, because I think, his finishing and how efficient he was. And then even though the volume was low, I think the touch looks good on the shot. So when you have a guy like Scoot Henderson, Shaden Sharp, Simons, this is a guy you want playing off of him.
Yeah, I like Cody Williams as well. I think that he's just going to be a nice piece in the league. Heading to pick number 8, we have Adam Finkelstein again, drafting for the Spurs. I'm looking at my top 100 right now, and I don't see any more skinny French guys left. So you might have to go off the board.
Skinny Lithuanian guys.
There is one of those.
Yeah, to be honest with you, this is not the way that I expected this to shake out. So I think, I'm in a little bit of this is a little bit of a quagmire. I'm probably gonna go, just because I want to avoid redundancy here, and I don't think Holland would be an ideal fit. And I think there's some redundancy between Risache and Matas. So I think I'm going to go Devin Carter. I'm not convinced that the offensive version of Devin Carter that we saw this year at Providence is going to be the guy that translates to the NBA. But what I am convinced of is that he is an elite competitor, an elite athlete, and one of the very best perimeter defenders in this class, and both on and off the ball. And you talk to anybody who's been around Devin Carter. It's interesting. I told this story earlier today. Devin Carter and Matas were high school teammates at Brewster Academy. And it was during the COVID year. And I remember going up there in the COVID year and kind of sitting on like the top row of the bleachers because you weren't able to interact, weren't able to talk to the coach. So I texted the coach, Jason Smith, who Jeff knows. And I said to him, am I crazy to think that Devin Carter is your best guy right now? And this was at a time when the shot was like almost broken. The shot has obviously made some significant strides since then. And he's just an alpha. He's an alpha competitor. He's a guy you don't bet against. And in this draft, when you don't have like star potential, I just love him for everything he's going to bring to the table. I do think there are guys who have potentially higher ceilings that I'm admittedly passing on right now, but I think his floor is super high. And if he develops some more offensive creativity or just continues to progress offensively, I think that thing, maybe if there's continued kind of linear progression offensively, it could unlock some more outcomes. So we're going to go Devin Carter here, but it is somewhat reluctant because this was a scenario that I was not anticipating.
Jonathan, I absolutely adore Devin Carter's game. I think he is a guy that does winning stuff. And to me, he is a perfect fit within just the Spurs culture, the Spurs organization, and playing for a guy like a Greg Popovich. You got 20 seconds here. Talk to me about Devin Carter.
I mean, he's good at everything. And I guess the only question, right, is the offensive ceiling and what translates offensively. But a couple things I like, like almost 9 rebounds a game. He's 6'2" in socks, and I think he has like 70 career blocks. I mean, those are the little things that is he going to be a lockdown defensive player? No, but I think those type of numbers tell a bigger story about the type of competitor and athlete that he is. And by the way, he cleaned up an athletic testing in Chicago, but the shot's better. He's one of the most efficient pick and roll players this year. He's gotten so much better around the basket. I mean, he just doesn't really have any obvious weakness except for the fact that he is a little bit smaller for his projected position, and he's got a little bit of a funky release on his jump shot, but I'm not going to hold it against him.
Yeah, he also loves taking 35-footers, and I think he shoots about 100% on the 35-footers that I watched him take this past season. Pick number 9, Memphis Grizzlies. Corey, we're going to you. What are you doing?
All right, let's get weird. With Devin Carter off the board, look, this is a team that I think really needs size. They really need some physicality. They need help on the boards. So I'm not a huge fan of a lot of the upside swings that are left. So I'm going to take Zach Edey for the Memphis Grizzlies. 7'5", 7'11" wingspan, 300 pounds, one of the best screen setters, in this entire draft, if not the best. And if I look at Ja Morant, who's pretty devastating off of a screen, now imagine when you have a top tier lob threat, a guy who's making contact and freeing him up even more in the basket, what that is going to do to defenses. So, I think that he is looked at in this context of this classic back to the basket big, because that's the role that he played. But I do think that his screen and roll game is severely underrated. And then, in the NBA, like, teams are not going to drape 4 guys all over his back. So I think that you still are going to be able to make use of his post game. He's improved as a passer. He's not Jokic. I don't even think that he showed the same kind of stuff as Donovan Clingan did, but he definitely improved his feel and his reads. But uber efficient guy, chip on his shoulder. I think he's a better defender than he gets credit for. I think, you saw in that Tennessee game when he was, really able to lock in that second half. He was anticipating stuff in that drop really well. Just his length, just being that big too, is a deterrent and, is intimidating as is. So I think he's going to be a good basketball player. And I think he's an outlier in this class. And in this draft, I don't think it hurts to take a shot on outliers, guys that are going to be able to give you a look that nobody else really has the luxury of having. And if anybody's seen him in person, it's kind of bewildering how a guy that size moves kind of as fluidly as he does. So I think he's on an upward trajectory. He's going to continue to get better. And I think this is a situation where we've already seen a Grizzlies team kind of thrive with a big guy who's kind of bruising like a Steven Adams, and he can do a lot of that same stuff. So for me, maybe it's a little early for some people, but I'm a big believer in Zach Edey and how he's going to translate to the NBA.
I love it. Sam, you got about 40 seconds here. Break down how you think Zach Edey fits as an NBA basketball player.
Yeah, I think it's very scheme dependent is a good way to put it. And I think Corey broke down, everything you need to know there. I think that in Memphis particularly, it's a pretty good fit. This is an organization that does tend to value high level producers. You can look through their draft history, guys like Brandon Clark, David Roddy. They're willing to take swings on unconventional players. And, in Edey, I totally agree with Corey. I think he's the best screen setter in this class. I don't even think it's really that close, to be honest. He's so physical. And I agree that there is some more ball screen potential than what I think people really understand. Like, Purdue always rolled him into kind of post-ups in those roll situations, but I think that he's also capable of just rolling and catching a lob high and finishing high, right? So yeah, no, I don't mind this pick. I'd probably try and trade down if I was Memphis, but we're not doing that in this exercise. So yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, I love it, man. I love seeing Zach Edey go early. One of the best stories in college basketball, one of my favorite players in college basketball the last couple of years. 10th pick, the Utah Jazz. Jonathan, we're going to you. Make a pick. You're muted. All right, Goodman, we're going to swap you in. Make a pick real quick.
This rocks.
Yeah. Sam, you make the pick.
Can I get back in here?
You just want me to roll? Here we go.
There he is.
Jonathan, you're back. Go ahead, Jonathan. Go.
I thought you guys were going to try and mute me because I wanted to take Ron Holland at number 10. This is around the horn here. Listen, Ron, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills with Ron Holland. Why does not everybody see a projected top 5 pick in this draft? I'm 19 and a half points in the G League at 18 years old. I had an executive the other day say he didn't shoot really well in his pro day. This guy is so young and he's a shot maker. He's not a shooter yet, but I think, looking what he does well, obviously a crazy athlete. The transition offense is going to translate the attacking in the open floor. I think he's gotten so much better creating for himself in the half court over the course of this year. And that was something I kind of questioned. I still had him number one preseason. And then he just got better in terms of getting to spots and capitalizing in the half court and one-on-one situations, ball screen situations. Yeah, he's not a great shooter right now, but again, I think he's a shot maker. And when you take into account, again, the other ways he can find ways to score, I just see that stuff translating. And everyone got on him for the turnovers early in the season. Like they made him a number one option at 18 years old in the G League. That was never supposed to be his role. That's not going to be his role in the NBA right away. And so, I think if he goes to a team and they kind of plays more of a complementary role to start, and he plays to his strengths, and he doesn't have the ball a ton, and his usage isn't what it was in the G League, those turnovers aren't going to happen. He's going to get more rhythm looks as a shooter, and I'm willing to bet on the improvement in terms of raising his 3-point percentage, and I'm willing to bet on the transition offense, the improving half-court creation, the finishing tools, the defensive tools, the motor. Like, we've seen him since he was, playing U16s with USA, and he's always one of the best guys on the floor. So I think people are overblowing his weaknesses given his age.
Well, that was a rousing statement of support of Ron Holland there for a guy that you said you would take with the number 1 overall pick, and you got him at number 10 right there. So I think that might be the best value that you're going to get in this draft for anybody. Number 11, that's me, the Chicago Bulls. And I just want to thank our producer, Dagan Hughes, for giving me the team that feels like they have the most question marks of anybody in the NBA at this point. I don't really know what's happening with DeMar DeRozan. I don't know what's happening with the Zach LaVine situation. Nobody knows if Lonzo Ball is ever going to play again. He dies who big baller brand could thrive. Their front court is old. Patrick Williams is up for a new contract. The good news is it feels like they kind of found something with Kobe White this year, but beyond that, there's so many different question marks going in there. I think if you are looking for a pick here, you probably want to kind of shoot for upside. And I had written down for best fits guys like Ron Holland, Cody Williams, and Tidjane Saloon, because I thought that Modest Buzelis was not going to be available here. But if Modest Buzelis is available at the number 11 pick, I think you got to take him. One of the best athletes in this draft, a guy that if you watch his highlights, throws down a lot of windmills when it doesn't feel like somebody should be throwing down windmills. Not quite the 3-and-D shooter that I think you would want, but I can see them betting on that becoming a thing, because you're getting a guy that is a top 5 to 7 talent in this draft at the number 11 pick. Sam, am I crazy for taking Modest here? And do you think he fits with the Bulls?
Yeah, look, this is my range for Modest. I have him a little bit lower than where other people do, because I just have questions on the jumper. Like, I'm not totally convinced that he can shoot. Like, I think that everyone points to the year at Sunrise last year where he shot like 40% from 3, but that's really kind of the outlier in his career to this point. You can go back and look at the AAU sample. You can, kind of find out about the high school sample. Obviously the sample this year with the G League, like, he's never really made shots before. So around this spot, like, as an upside swing, I love it for Chicago. I think it makes an incredible amount of sense for them to take a, chance on a guy that has this kind of athleticism and shooting, athleticism and like shot creation ability, really. But it does come down to the shot for me. Like, if he's not going to shoot it, like, I do really wonder if there's a floor for him. Like, it could be like a, back end of the rotation guy if he doesn't shoot it well.
Yeah, Fink, he's another guy from New England. You mentioned him earlier, seeing him practice with Devin Carter. You got about 30 seconds here. What do you make of him long term?
I was honestly hoping you didn't ask me, because I will say that my biggest concern with Matas, and I co-sign everything Sam just said about the shooting, but there is a history of the teams he played on underachieving. Happened at Brewster, happened at Sunrise. Expressions in that last EYBL season was a little bit of the exception to the rule, but he's got a history of being kind of uncompetitive on the defensive end of the floor. Now, he's a very personable kid. He's great to talk to. He's super charming, so he's going to interview really well. He's going to do things like challenge Risachet to one-on-one, but when it comes down to locking in, doing the work on a daily basis that it takes to be good and to maximize your potential, That's what he's got to commit to, and commit to it for the next 15 years when it's not about, offers and all the tangible foolish stuff that kids get, consumed with early on. The tools are there, but I just have some questions about, the process and the commitment to maximizing those tools.
Goodman, you are picking number 12 for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Where are you going here? How do you get them over the hump? How do you get them to a point where they are not getting knocked out in the second round of the NBA playoffs?
I mean, I'm going to try to get into the mind of one Sam Presti, but I'm clearly not even close to as smart as Sam is. So I think they need another big. Like I'm looking at it from a fit perspective. I know Presti loves to kind of roll the dice here, go young. I just think they've got enough, Shea and Chet and enough of that damn commercial. I want to see it again. But those two are super talented. Obviously, you got Jalen Williams. You've got some other guy, Lou Dort. They got some good players. I think they need a big, but I'm looking at the board and I'm like, can I go Kyle Filipowski? Can I go Yves Missy? Can I go Khalil Ware? I think you're reaching on all of those guys. But I don't know what else to do here. I mean, Jacoby Walter. I guess I'm gonna go Yves Missy on this one, just because of his potential and his upside. And he can run the floor, he can block shots, he can be a roller with Shea. And I think his potential is really high. This is one of those that I could see a Sam Presti going with and pulling a little bit of a reach, a little bit of a surprise here. And I know the panel's probably going to kill me on this one, and maybe rightfully so, but I just like his ceiling.
Sam, I'm going to go to you on this one.
Yeah, look, I have a top 20 grade on Yves Missy. It just doesn't fit what they look for. Like, I know that they, need a big in some respect, right? If only just to match up with some of the bigs in the, Western Conference, right? Like Nikola Jokic and the Minnesota guys, everything like that. But they really like guys that can dribble, pass, shoot. Like that's been their MO as they build this entire thing right now. So, Yves, I do worry a little bit about like all of those skills, frankly. But like incredible athlete. Like I think Yves is almost a no fail guy in the NBA because he's so athletic. He's an unbelievable kid from everybody that you talk to. A real worker, came to basketball late, really just started playing organized basketball like 3 or 4 years ago. And, has such incredible athleticism. He is a total joke athletically in terms of being able to rise and finish high above the rim. And, I think his defensive, fundamentals and his, space awareness and drop really needs to improve. But, you see some moments where he's a little bit switchable out onto perimeter guards. And, to me, again, like he's almost like a no fail, at least as a backup big. I think he's probably going to end up as a starter, but I don't know that he'll ever be like a top 10, top 12 starter in the NBA either. So, given the lack of, dribble, pass, shoot stuff, I do wonder if this is the direction Oklahoma City would go. But, like Jeff said, like Sam Presti has surprised us many times before, and he does love these like really high level character guys. So, it's not like crazy, I don't think.
Well, Sam, I went to you because I thought you'd be the guy that would be able to say, Goodman, that's a terrible pick in the nicest way, and you did not.
I was kind of hoping for that too, to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah. Pink, you're picking 13 for the Kings. Who you got?
So I was expecting to go with a guard here, given Malik Monk's free agency, but this is another one like the 8th pick where I'm just, I'm facing unexpected options here. So I think I'm going to go with the guy whose name I consistently mispronounce, and that's Tajon Saloon. Sam or John, somebody can tell me if I butchered that. But reason being, I think, is when you look at this Sacramento roster, like you got Sabonis in there and everything he does from a playmaking perspective, from a rebounding perspective, but there's a certain level of physicality that this team is missing inside the paint. And while Saloon is young, he's got a really impressive body type, one that should massively fill out in the coming years. And then he's got a really high quality motor. I actually had a scout in Chicago at the Combine who was comparing this draft to 2013. And I know that's become a pretty consistent narrative. I wrote something about it myself, but the thing that Scout said to me is he said, in that draft, I think what we missed is we just should have taken the guy who played the hardest, who had the best body. And obviously that's an oversimplification. And he was talking about Giannis, and I'm not trying to compare to John to Giannis, but I think the philosophy is relevant. And given that Sacramento could really use some physicality along the front line, I think this makes a lot of sense. And then if the skill continues to come on and he grows into a bigger role offensively, I think this player is one that has some really good scenarios long term. He was one that I was high on in this draft. Probably would have even taken higher than 13, but I think for Sacramento it makes sense in this spot.
Jonathan and Corey, you guys both got about 30 seconds here. What's your take on him? Break down to John's game. Jonathan, we'll go to you first.
Yeah, I mean, I think the obvious draw is just a simple combination of 6'9" size, a guy who made over 73s this year, open floor athleticism and defensive tools. And you hope that's kind of, a 3-and-D energizer type of guy. I can't picture him putting the ball down on the floor often. And he was pretty inefficient finishing around the basket below the rim when it wasn't like an easy dunk. He didn't rebound at a high level. He didn't really pass much. I'm not the highest on him, but as you start to move into, the mid-first round here, I get it. He's still 18 years old. Like, he can add a lot to his game, and I do like the fit with Sacramento.
Corey?
Yeah, he's a guy who has confused me through much of the process for a lot of the reasons, but I think that if the shot comes around, like the flashes have shown, he's a guy who can kind of play a role similar to maybe like Michael Porter Jr. offensively, where, he's kind of like a little stiff, but he can make tough shots just because he's so big. Now, obviously, Michael Porter Jr. had a much better track record of shooting, pre-NBA, but if it gets there, and he's not shy, like he's pulling up from the logo in playoff games, then a guy who can, dunk and get steals and rebound and hit threes, like that's valuable. So next to Sabonis, it's a pretty good fit.
Sam, pick 14, the last pick in the lottery, the last one where we're going to have 3 minutes to break down the pick, will be the Portland Trailblazers. You already selected Cody Williams from Colorado. Who are you pairing with him in this draft class for the Trailblazers?
Yeah, so that was going to be my pick for Portland as well. So thanks, Fink. I appreciate you. I instead am going to go with Kyle Filipowski here. This is just not a spot where I have a ton of guys remaining on my board that I love for them. The highest guy remaining on my board is Bub Carrington, and they just have a ton of like shot creating guards, and that just like doesn't totally line up for me with what they should do. So, I talked a little bit earlier about when I took Alex Sarr for the Hawks that I really like these bigs that I think have potential to dribble, pass, shoot, and I think that Filipowski, not just potentially, but I think just like does dribble, pass, and shoot at a pretty high level as a big man in the NBA. And you can play him at the 5. You can play those 5-out looks. I know that Portland already has Dewap Reith, a player that had a really strong rookie season this year and can certainly at least space to the corners. But, again, like I really think that every NBA team, if they're going to try and build and they're going to try and create a circumstance where, you're fostering a strong developmental environment for guards like a Scoot Henderson, like an Anthony Simons, like a Shaedon Sharpe, you really, really want guys like Kyle Filipowski who are going to be able to step away and knock it down from 3, who are going to be good dribble handoff partners, short roll partners, and can do a few different things to attack off the bounce against bigs. So, look, I think this is a little higher than where Flip's going to end up going on draft night. And I think if I was Portland, I would probably try and trade down in all honesty. But, if I'm stuck here, I'll take Filipowski and just kind of be happy.
Goodman, I actually think Filipowski has a really high floor in the NBA because of the fact that he could do all of those things that Sam just mentioned. I can see him being a guy that hangs around for 12 years as an off the bench player in a Kelly Olynyk role. Jeff, what do you make of Filipowski? I know you like him.
Yeah, I think he's a versatile big. Listen, Fink's seen him a whole lot more than any of us from a young stage because he was a New England prep school guy. But, he's got a little bit of a mean streak to him. Not the toughest kid in the world, but I think he's gotten tougher. And Fink, what's your take on him?
So I thought the narrative on him early on, that he was this shooting big was lazy. And again, coming into college, like that's what everybody referred to him as, like this stretch big. That's not who he was. He was a playmaking big who liked to put the ball on the floor. He really liked to pass. I think he was like trying to pattern his game after Jokic, but he did have really good touch. And to Sam's point, he has become more of a floor spacer, and I think that's going to continue to grow. If and when that happens, he's just got a ton of offensive versatility and offensive structure for all the reasons Sam made. The other thing I'll say is that I think that hip procedure really helped him. He's moving much better. He looks leaner than he ever was in high school. And just the movement skills and the fluidity are far better than I think any of us would have projected in high school.
All right. So Flip is the last pick of the lottery. So we're going to start going to 2 minutes on the clock for each one of these. We'll roll through it a little bit quicker here so we can get out of here by about 9:30. I will just say I am glad that he survived that potentially career-ending foot injury that he suffered in the court storm at Wake Forest to be able to make it to the draft and see his NBA dreams come true. Jonathan, we're going to you, man. Pick 15, the Miami Heat. Who are you taking?
Let's stop the slide here and take Rob Dillingham. I think it's a good guy to talk about because I think he's become a little bit more divisive than he was early in the season, but you got to talk about what's going to translate. I mean, this guy is probably the most potent, ball handler and shot maker in this draft. I think the question really is at 164 pounds, how much is that going to limit him as a finisher, creating separation? Obviously on defense is almost likely to be a negative at that end of the floor. But I think at 15, we're starting to nitpick here with Dillingham. You have to bank on his ability to just put the ball in the basket, make plays. And I think maybe an underrated part of his game was how good he was of a catch and shoot guy. Like I didn't expect him to be as efficient off the ball. And we've seen him in so many different settings at this point where he has the ball so often and he dances a lot, takes tough shots. I like him in kind of, a place like Miami where he's not going to have the freedom to dance like he normally does. And he's going to have to tighten the shot selection a little bit, but he'll play to his strengths kind of in the 6-man role. And that's kind of the perfect role for him. I don't really see a starting point guard. There's going to be obviously questions about who he could defend, in terms of starting guards. But I love him coming off the bench for a good team with a disciplined coach.
Yeah, the 15th pick is probably not where he wants to go, but I will say getting him in that Heat culture and allowing him to be in a place where not defending and not playing a certain style is not going to be accepted is probably the best place for him as a player long-term. With the 16th pick, Corey, you are drafting for the Philadelphia 76ers. Who you got?
Yeah, so I was a little nervous that Sam was going to take this guy at a certain point. Luckily for the Sixers, they can kind of go any direction they want because they have nobody on their roster going into next year. I'm going with Bub Carrington from Pittsburgh. He's the highest guy on my board. I would have taken a little bit earlier. I think that the Sixers need synergistic fits with their stars, and I think that Tyrese Maxey is malleable enough that he can play with another guy who does need the ball in his hands at times. In a lot of ways, it can, maybe mirror some of the Kentucky style Maxey playing with quickly, although Ashton Higgins was there to stop some of the fun. But I just love the kid's ability to create his own shot, hit it over 100 dribble jumpers. And I think that a lot of his efficiency suffered because he wasn't necessarily the greatest catch and shoot guy, which I know is something that he's focusing on during the course of this pre-draft process. But he's 6'5", he's got a 6'8" wingspan. He came in weighing more than I thought. He was only a few pounds less than Ron Holland. So I think he's got a frame that he's going to grow into. And, when you talk about dribble, pass, shoot guys in the NBA, like he has all of those skills. And I thought that he made strides defensively, really competing. And, I just think that the Sixers, they're going to fill their roster out with a lot of guys in free agency. So they can kind of afford to take an upside swing that I personally think also has kind of a higher floor than, maybe most people might give him credit for. But he's just such an intriguing prospect and super talented guy who can do so many things well.
Yeah, Fink, we got about 20 seconds here, but I remember talking with Randolph Childress about him, and he said the big thing about Bub is that he's just learning how to play as a 6'5" point guard because he's used to being a 6'1" kid. What do you make of that? What do you make of being a late bloomer?
Yeah, and certainly to the previous point, like the fact that he's now filling out physically because his frame was incapable of adding weight in high school. So the fact that we've seen him take his game to brand new levels and now his body's starting to catch up, I think there's a reason why a lot of people are really intrigued with his upside.
Jeff, you are picking 17th for the Lakers. I swear, if you take Bronny James here, I'm kicking you off the show.
No, hell no, I'm not taking.
But what did Rich Paul say?
What, you think I'm out of my mind here? I'm absolutely not even considering Bronny until pick 55. I'll take Bronny at pick 55. I'm not taking him here at 17. I'm taking Terrence Shannon Jr. I think they need somebody that can impact their team today. I think they need some perimeter defense because it's awful right now. I'd like a big, but I don't think you take Khalil Ware, especially after they took Hood Schifino last year out of Indiana, and he didn't do a whole lot. I just love Shannon because he's a downhill driver whose shot got better. Obviously, he got through his legal issues last week, but I think he's a guy 24 years old you can put out there right now, and he can impact the game. And obviously, the Lakers have a very, very small window remaining with LeBron James.
Yeah, if I was actually the GM of the Orlando Magic sitting here, I'd be very frustrated because that's who I was kind of eyeing up for the number 18 pick. Sam, when it comes to Shannon, you're getting a guy that's already 23 years old, but he's a guy that can also impact the game, I think, at the NBA level right now. How much does age factor into a decision when you are kind of drafting in these mid-teens range?
Yeah, it's case by case. In Terrence's case, I think it does matter because his specific weaknesses, in my opinion, it's kind of hard for me to envision them like getting better given that he turns 24 before he'll play an NBA game. Like, I really just worry about the feel for the game. Like, I have a second round grade on Terrence Shannon, just as a basketball player, removing kind of everything else. I don't know that I buy the shot, and I don't know that I buy the decision making. I think that he played like a very power athletic based game in college that, mostly revolved and devolved in the case of the Connecticut game into driving into the paint and finishing, around and through under talented bigs. And, I'm a little bit lower, but I get the appeal. If you just really buy him on defense and you buy the shot, like if those are the two things you're buying, then, I get having a higher grade.
All right. I am picking 18th for Orlando. And what I have written down for what Orlando needs is they need an offensive creator and they need a guy that can kind of be a shooter, somebody that can space the floor. Like I really like the core that they've built there, right? With Paolo, I think is a legitimate star in the making. I love Franz Wagner, and I'm blown away that he's still just 22 years old. I always forget how young he is. And I was impressed that Jalen Suggs was kind of able to redefine himself as almost like a 3-and-D, kind of an off guard instead of having to be a point guard. But that kind of leaves Orlando in a situation where they need shooting and they need a playmaker. And I'm going to go with the guy that has fallen here. I'm going to go with the guy that's injured. I'm going to go with the guy that is a 6'6", kind of a initiator. And I'm going to bet on the fact that you get him into an NBA organization, they're going to find a way to get his knee healthy. And that's Nikola Topic. He's fallen from a guy that is potential top 10 pick to now to the 18th pick. And he's 6'6", he's long, he is a creator, he can pass the ball. And I think if you are getting him 18, I think you're getting pretty good value there. Corey, is this too big of a risk taking a guy that has these kind of knee issues?
No, I don't think so. I think he's so young, and I think that like science and medical science has come such a long way since Derrick Rose's career was derailed by, a torn ACL. So I think that, he's going to recover just fine. I think that the fit with Orlando is maybe a little clunky especially if the shot doesn't come around. But when he played with Red Star, he did show that he can play off the ball a little bit effectively in the limited games that he played. So his upside though at 6'7" and his passing vision, I mean, at this point it is too too hard to pass up on a guy like him. I'm a huge fan of Topic still, and I don't think the knee injury should really affect his stock all that much, given how young he is.
All right, Sam, you are drafting 19th for the Toronto Raptors, who in these media parts we call the Fighting Luke Wins. Who are you taking, and how do you rebuild Toronto with the 19th pick in this year's NBA draft?
Yeah, it's funny. Like when you guys gave me Toronto, I was like sitting there like kind of frustrated because I think they're the team that like I have the least feel for right now, like of all the teams in the first round in terms of what they're actually going to do. But this turned out well. Like Jared McCain's sitting here and I'm just like very happy with this, because if I have Scotty Barnes as my, player that I'm building around and he's my franchise guy, just made an all-star game this year, the thing that I need to do is just surround him with shooters everywhere. They drafted Grady Dick last year. They acquired Emmanuel Quickly this past season. Getting another shooter in Jared McCain, a guy that I think has more upside than what other people seem to maybe. I think he's more than just a shooter. I think he is somebody that can attack closeouts. I think he's comfortable playing in ball screens. I think he got way better throughout the course of the season this year at just being able to comfortably attack and get into the paint. And on top of that, I know he's small, but the guys that tend to exceed these, issues in terms of height that we see across the NBA are the guys that are thickly built and strong and physical. Jared McCain's a guy that you talk to folks about around the league, and he's unbelievable in the weight room this year for Duke, has a great attitude. Intel is off the charts, incredible competitor. I just really buy into Jared McCain, and I think this is kind of an easy pick for me. He's my last lottery grade in this class among players that have been picked.
How much did his ability to sing on TikTok impact where you have him graded out?
0, honestly, but I should watch. I guess I should watch that. I've seen a couple of the dancing videos. I haven't seen the singing yet.
Sam has the same nails, by the way, Rob. Sam has the same nails. Show us your nails.
Yeah,
There you go. All right,
There
pick
you
number
go.
20, the Cleveland Cavaliers. Adam Finkelstein, you are making this pick. Who are you taking?
He really can sing. He's like a really, really good singer. But turnabout is fair play here because McCain, I was kind of just shocked he was still there. I think the other guy that I would give a long look here if Goodman hadn't taken him like second overall would be Yves Missy, because I think that Cleveland is, really in a position where Kobe Altman's got to figure out if he's going to continue with this Twin Tower type lineup. But I think the best player on the board right now is Tristan da Silva. And if Cleveland is in a position where they're going to give this unit one more run at it, and who knows if that's going to happen, but he's probably the best plug and play option on the board. Somebody who can come in, give you immediate minutes because he can space the floor. He really knows how to play and just kind of has an ability to play efficient basketball without needing to be a focal point. So I think that he's going to be looked at by the Lakers at 17 card, but if he's open here, I would probably, and I don't love any of the bigs that are on the board. I think he would be my pick.
Corey, what do you make of Tristan, and what do you make of his development and his path with the Cavs?
I love Tristan. I thought about him at some of the other spots. In a lot of ways, I think that maybe he's the kind of guy that you hope Buzelis turns into. Like, he is just good at a lot of things. He's got good feel. He has been an excellent shooter over the last few years at multiple levels at that, and he's not just a three-point shooter. And I think at this part of the draft, like when you already have two guys who are ball dominant at the guard position, getting a guy who can shoot, can get the ball, attack a closeout, maybe run a second side, pick and roll, make the right read, and is just big. And I think it's, an easy plug and play pick for Cleveland. So I think he'd do well there.
All right. Pick 21, the New Orleans Pelicans. Jonathan, that is going to be you.
Yeah, I like Isaiah Collier. I think, obviously, in the beginning of the year, people were talking about top 3 pick. And then the turnovers happened and the shooting never came around. And I think people kind of jumped off the wagon a little bit too early and let that overshadow what he does do well. And listen, I agree. I get it. If you want a ball dominant guy to be a good decision maker and to be a guy who can shoot off the dribble, but I think in the right role that values his strengths and allows him to play away from his weaknesses a little bit. Like, I like him coming off the bench and just putting pressure on the defense, getting out in the open floor, have defenses backpedaling, playing through contact, being aggressive. And I do think, he can be a very good playmaker. It might come with some turnovers, but if you limit his minutes, maybe a 20-minute per game guy, I don't think they hurt you as much. So I think with Collier, I really like what he does well for a bench spark type role. And I think New Orleans could probably use an extra ball handler there. We'll see what their roster looks like next year. But I think people kind of were looking for a new narrative. We're kind of getting bored of him at the top and really kind of threw him down the board so fast and so far. And at this point, I think he's more of a value pick if we're talking about a guy in the 20s who's 6'5" with his frame, and that's creative off the dribble and a strong finisher. So I think his shot could be, eventually get close to maybe league average. And I think that if that happens, then you have a starting caliber player. But in the meantime, I like him just doing what he does well, maybe coming off the bench and just kind of limiting the ways that he can hurt you by, reducing his role in minutes.
It's always good when you say the best way to make this guy effective is by reducing his minutes. It's always just an absolute vote of confidence.
Again,
Corey,
I think I just fired myself twice, by the way.
Yeah, there you go. Corey, you're picking 22nd for the Phoenix Suns. Who do you like here?
All right, I'm going to take Tyler Kolek for the Phoenix Suns here. I think that this is a team that needs a floor general type point guard. You're signing guys like Isaiah Thomas. You need depth at this spot. So you also need somebody who's a mother effer. And if they're going to actually step on the floor and play with veterans like Devin Booker and Kevin Durant, and we know that Tyler Kolek is that, he's not going to be afraid to step on the floor with that core three guys that they have and think that he belongs. So Phoenix is a super expensive roster. It's going to be hard for them to, finagle and get good depth pieces. So if you can get somebody that is going to be a solid player potentially right away at a position of need, I think it's a pretty easy decision to think that way. And Tyler Kolek, we know what he can do. In a lot of ways, going back to a Phoenix guy, he reminds me of a Goran Dragic type guy. Maybe not as quick, maybe not as good off the bounce, but if you're talking about a guy who's going to be able to make every read in the book, he's going to hit spot up shots. And he is going to bring an energy and a juice to that team every night. I think that it's a pretty seamless fit for them.
There is one guy in the sport of basketball that Jeff Goodman likes more than Robbie Hummel, and that is Tyler Kolek. Jeff, talk to me about this pick. Talk to me about Tyler going to the NBA.
I mean, I'm picking next at 23 for Milwaukee. I mean, come on. What are we doing here? We can't let him slide one more pick. Milwaukee's seen him play John Horst 150 times probably. And I think he would have fit with Milwaukee also. But I love Kolek. Like you said, I love his toughness. I love his ability to make people better. He's not TJ McConnell, obviously. They're very, very, very different players. But what he can do is get to the basket when he wants because of the toughness, because of his ability to kind of get into the seams. But, again, much better shooter. Obviously not the defender that TJ McConnell is.
All right, Goodman, you're picking 23rd for the Bucks. Who are you putting next to Giannis that's left in this draft?
Boy, I think they need a front court guy, but I don't love the front court guys out there right now. I'm thinking about Khalil Ware again, but I'm not going there. I'm going to go Baylor Shireman. He's got the size. He can make shots. He knows how to play. He can move the ball. Again, is he the biggest need for Milwaukee? No, but I think he can help Milwaukee right away again because, of the fact that he gives them kind of a really versatile offensive player that can just fit in. Now, defensively, that's my concern, obviously, with Baylor Shireman. But, again, Khalil Ware would have given him some of the things that they probably need a little bit more of an insurance policy for Brooke Lopez. Another shot blocker, some youth on the front line, but I'm going Baylor Shireman here.
Yeah, I love Baylor Shireman. Another guy that's a little bit older though, Sam. How do you see him transitioning? How do you see him fitting in at the NBA level. Another guard of the Big East that averaged like 27 rebounds a game.
Yeah, no, I love Shireman as well. I have him. I think he might have been the highest player remaining for me at this point. I think that Milwaukee more than anything just needs guys who can play. So that would be valuable. They really just need depth pieces. But I probably would go. Look, here's the thing with Milwaukee. They're so hemmed in terms of needing a big who can shoot next to Giannis. Like, you have to play that way in some respect. And with Brook Lopez getting up there in age, I probably would have taken a flyer on one of like Khalil Ware or Deron Holmes, just because I think that that's kind of what you need to do. Like, it's just really hard to find those guys in free agency. It's hard to, actually get a chance to select those players. So I probably would have gone with one of the shooting bigs, but like, I can't even complain about this because I just love Baylor Shireman so much. Like, I think he's an awesome player. So yeah, I think he's going to play in the NBA for a while.
Yeah. Full disclosure, I'm picking next for the Knicks, and I have back-to-back picks. And what my game plan was as we were coming up to these picks is to take Tyler Kolek and to take Baylor Shireman, because I think that the two things that you need for this Knicks team right now, beyond just like, a new trainer and a new medical department, and maybe like some kind of HGH situation where you kind of avoid having all of these dudes getting injured over and over and over again. And I think the other obvious pick here would probably be Mark Armstrong, because as far as I know, he's the only guy from Villanova that is eligible to be drafted this year. And if you're building the Nova Knicks, don't you kind of have to draft a guy from Villanova? No, but I think you want, I feel like they just kind of need bodies at this point. If you are the Knicks, you need guys that are going to be able to contribute right away, and you need bodies. So with the 24th pick, I'm going to go with Deron Holmes first. He provides you a little bit of insurance up front in case they're not able to figure out whatever's going on with Isaiah Hartenstein and that entire situation. And I think that he's a little bit underrated when it comes to the development as a shooter and kind of what he's been as a defender. And look, he's just been so productive at the college level over the course of his 3 years that I think he's a guy that will fit well at the NBA level. Jonathan, you got about 30 seconds here, but you also had the Knicks drafting Deron Holmes. Why do you think he fits there for him?
Yeah, kind of like you said, they just needed another body who you can kind of bank on, like what he gives you. And we don't know how their front court situation is going to play out with Hartenstein likely to get some offers out there, and Mitchell Robinson, who can never play more than 2 weeks in a row. And so with Deron, I think you can bank on the finishing, translating. He's just he's like a walking easy bucket. And, you talked about his development, he started off here, and then each year, his game kind of went out this way. I think the question is, the stuff out here, is that going to carry over, the shooting, the off the dribble stuff? And I think at 24, it's a worthwhile gamble to take, but you're really taking him for his athleticism around the paint.
Yeah. So for the second pick here, if I'm the Knicks in this spot, I probably am going to try to trade it, just because I don't think that there's anyone that really fits what they need that is going to be available here at this spot that you can't get maybe 10 or 12 picks later on, especially because they have, I believe, what is the 38th pick in the second round. But since I have to make this draft selection in this spot, I'm going to go with Jacoby Walter, because I feel like he is a guy that he's hung around a little bit longer than I thought that he would. Loved the ability as a shot maker. I loved what I saw from him, especially early on this season, as an offensive weapon. And I just kind of buy guys that are coming out of Scott Drew's system. Corey, what do you make of Jacoby Walter, and how do you think that he would fit playing for Tom Thibodeau?
I think this is a great value play, right? Jacoby was a guy who, was a potential top 5, top 10 pick at points of the season. So to get a guy like him who, despite the percentages, I think is going to be a real shooter in the NBA. He takes tough shots, off movement, and the flashes he had, having some really big scoring outputs. I think, you can project him to be a really solid player given his frame, his pedigree. He's got the frame length to be a good defender. So, I think he's probably going to spend time in Westchester getting G League reps, learning how to defend and honing that 3-point shot, getting those percentages up. And the Knicks can afford to be patient with him. But with his talent level, like to have that guy in your system kind of incubating and just waiting, a couple of years down the line to kind of give him heavy minutes, I think it could work. A lot of ways he might be able to give you what the Knicks wanted out of Quentin Grimes, down the line. So I think that this is a great selection, and both of those picks, if they were there, like I don't necessarily know if you even really need to trade them just to trade them if guys like those are on the board. So I think pretty good situation for Jacoby and the Knicks there.
All right, Corey, you flipped this draft on its head with the number 2 pick of Donovan Clingan, and then you did it again with the number 9 pick of Zach Edey. This is your last pick in our first round mock. What are you going to do? Where are the fireworks, man? Who are we taking for the Washington Wizards, number 26?
Let's keep it weird. I'm going to take a shot on AJ Johnson here. They went a more safe route, I guess you would say, early. So now we're at the back end of the draft. Let's take a swing on like a 6'5", 6'6" guard who's a former 5-star, who has, a lot of juice when he has it going. Really rough year. Not really any way to sugarcoat it in the NBL this year with the Hawks, but I think the flashes that he has as a shot maker, the fact that he played well in the combine, his athleticism popped there. He made some good passing reads. And I think the one thing he did do well in his limited minutes in Australia was I thought the defensive flashes were really solid. I thought the effort that he gave, the way he was fighting over screens despite, how weak he was. I think he has talent. When I saw him at the Iverson game, I was like, wow, I think this guy might be the best guy on the floor. So at this part of the draft, when you are a team like Washington who isn't on a timeline and can afford to maybe take a swing on somebody, I think having a guy with this kind of pedigree is maybe at this part of the draft the guy that you swing on. So he can certainly not pan out, but I think that if he does work out, he brings things to the table with his tools that there aren't too many guys left in this draft have. So at this part of the draft, I'm going to swing on AJ Johnson.
Sam, you are a resident Australian here. You got 20 seconds. He averaged 2.9 points and 1.2 boards this season. What happened?
Yeah, look, like the NBL is no joke. It's a hard league. I totally agree with Corey in terms of the defensive side. That's what Illawarra was super excited about with him by the end of the year. He was able to come in and just really change games with his energy and effort at the point of attack and, kind of just speed the tempo of the game up. He's definitely a project. Like, it's going to take time, but, this isn't too far off of where I have him. So, yeah, no, I think it's a good pick.
All right, Fink, number 27, Minnesota Timberwolves. Who are you drafting?
So we are going to take Johnny Furphy. We are going to try and surround Anthony Edwards with shooting and floor spacing for years to come. Furphy is someone who was originally planning to stay at NBA Academy this past year. He reclassified up late to go to Kansas, started coming off the bench, worked his way into the starting lineup. So he's exceeded expectations at each step along the way. And that's something that I really value as an evaluator is someone that is getting better at a rapid rate. I think if you just look at a data point of where they are now, it can be misleading. But if you look at where this guy was a year ago, where he was 6 months ago, it's crazy to think. But in January of last season, he was considered a mid-major recruit. And now he's a very likely first-round pick. And he's got that shooting that I think is really going to be valuable in Minnesota as they try and create spacing around one of the more dynamic young guards in the game. He's going to have to get better defensively before we can get him on the floor. But I think the reality is Minnesota doesn't need a whole lot from him right away. And so this is more of a long-term investment.
Yeah, Jonathan, what do you make of Johnny Furphy, and what do you make of his long-term potential?
Yeah, I like him here in the 20s. Again, he's got a pretty simplified game. He takes good shots. You buy the catch and shoot stuff. You buy the athleticism in the open floor. I think he's pretty tough. He's going to be a play finisher. You're not going to ask him to put the ball down much, but you put him on Minnesota, you don't need him to. So I think he kind of has a good feel for playing that complementary role. He's got the skill set to go with it. So easy, good pick in the late 20s.
All right, Sam, number 28 pick, Denver Nuggets. The story of the NBA in 2024 is if you don't win a title, then people start talking about whether or not you have to blow up a roster. I don't know why you'd want to blow up a roster that has Nikola Jokic on it. So make a pick that's going to get them back to being NBA champs, man. What do you do here?
Yeah. So look, I don't know if there's a pick that's going to do that, but this is an organization under Calvin Booth that definitely has a track record of drafting older at this point. I'm going to go with Jalen Tyson, a third-year player out of Cal, has moved around, went to Texas, then Texas Tech, up to Cal this season, and really blossomed and broke out. I think of him not necessarily as like a lower, ups or a low upside player. I think of him almost as like a high upside swing than anything, because he's so on ball and he's got this really awesome blend of deceleration mixed with power that I think can be really valuable in today's NBA. You look at some of the best ball handlers across the league, they do tend to have that ability. He's not wildly explosive, but can rise up and dunk occasionally. But it's that like deceleration and power blend that I think is really, really valuable today. And I am intrigued to see where he ends up on draft night. I think that there's a pretty wide range, but if it is Denver, I think it would be fun because this is a team that I think actually could use a little bit more shot creation and ball handling next to a Jamal Murray. And, I actually like Tyson a little bit more on the ball than I do off the ball. So I would be intrigued to see if they could get him as a potential bench guy who can, maybe at some point run the second unit and then play with the starters as well.
All right, Jonathan, you are picking 29th for the Jazz. You selected Ron Holland, who is apparently the best player in this draft with the number 10 pick for the Jazz. So how are you going to back that up, man? You've already made the best pick in this draft so far. What can you do for number 2 for the Jazz at number 29?
Let's take the most, I'd say like the most special defender in the draft for the worst defensive team in the league, and Ryan Dunn. I think Ryan Dunn is an outlier. Like I get why you could be a little bit hesitant on a guy who's so limited offensively, but defensively he does things, I mean, like we've never seen before, at least not in recent memory. And I like him at that power forward position, but it really doesn't really matter. He's going to go out there and he's just going to make plays defensively on and off the ball. 3.0 steal percentage, 10% block percentage. I mean, those are pretty unheard of numbers for a forward. And so offensively, you need the right pieces around him to kind of mask some of his weaknesses as a creator and as a shooter. But I think when you take into account his potential defensive impact, you can kind of put aside those offensive weaknesses, assuming he's going to give you that play finishing, the transition scoring, the easy buckets around the rim. And a Long Island guy like me, I've seen him for a while, and like he's got a little bit more offense than I think he was able to show this year, and you hope that just like a hint of it shows up sometime down the road. But again, I think at this point, to take a defensive specialist like him, who you could really bank on that stuff translating for the worst defensive team in the league, is number 29. Let's do it.
All right, Goodman, take us home. 30th pick of the draft, the Boston Celtics, the national or the NBA, not the national. I got my college blinders on. The NBA champions. Who are you selecting for them?
So this is the perfect way to end it for me. Picking for the Boston Celtics, living here in Boston. They need some size up front, some youth. Obviously we know Porzingis, who knows if he'll be healthy. Al Horford's going to be 39. So where do I go for the final pick, Rob? I go to Bloomington, Indiana, and I take Khalil Ware to finish it off. A big that can also shoot it. He can stretch it a little bit. He shot over 40% from 3 this year, almost average a double-double. Super talented. The key will be obviously to get that motor going all the time. And who better to teach him than Al Horford next year? So I think that's a perfect pick at 30 for Brad Stevens.
Yeah, Khalil Ware was, I believe, like a top 6 to 8 player in the class of, was it 2022? He's a sophomore. Yeah. So the class of 2022. So there's a lot of talent and a lot of potential there. And I actually, I like that pick. All right. To wrap this up, you guys each got about 10 or 15 seconds. Let's go quickly on the best player that is left on your board right now. Sam, we'll start with you.
Oh God, I just closed my board. Who would it be? That's maybe I'll just give some time to Jamal. Tyler Smith is up there. I'll just give some love to Jamal Shed because I'm assuming that Tyler Smith is going to get said by somebody else. I love Jamal Shed. I think he's one of the best defensive guards I've ever evaluated point blank in terms of the tape. As a passer and playmaker offensively, I think there's some upside, but we'll see if he's able to stick offensively enough to get his game-changing defense on the court.
Corey?
I'll go with Keyshawn George from Miami. Yeah, I mean, I just think big, long shooters that can put the ball on the deck and, have some playmaking feel, have a real shot. So I think he's an interesting swing that I probably could have considered in a whole bunch of spots.
Yeah, I think that's who I would have on mine. Fink, what about you?
Yeah, I'll mention Tyler Smith. I think this is another guy that Boston could theoretically be interested in as a floor spacing big, a lefty. Somebody went to OTE very early on in the high school years, back when it was the professional option, so he lost his amateur status. But he can shoot it, and I think he's a more functional athlete than he gets credit for. I have some concerns about physicality inside, which have kind of been consistent concerns over the years, but I think he's got a definite chance to be a first rounder.
Jonathan?
Yeah, let's go with Tyler Smith, like what Sam said earlier. 6'11", I'm buying the shot. Finishing tools, I mean, it's, again, a pretty simple game. Maybe not a ton of upside, but maybe you hope he's going to be like a Channing Frye or a Bobby Portis type. And I think at 31, it's worth the gamble based on his age and his production in the G League.
All right, well, we are a week away from the start.
No. We're not done yet. We are not done yet. We have to have a conversation before we finish this. I want all of you. At what number, we'll start with you, Sam. At what number would you draft, or range would you draft Bronny James, if at all?
So, just purely on his game, or are we talking like other factors included here?
No, you throw anything. Listen, what number is Bronny James? Okay, how about this? If his name wasn't Bronny James, where would you take Bronny James in the draft?
Yeah, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Just point blank. Like we can just be honest about it. We wouldn't be having this conversation. There is, as far as I know, going back to at least 2008, there has not been a 6'1" player who was a one and done that averaged under 5 points who has been drafted. And this is a guy that shot 35% from the field and 27% from three. I get the defensive stuff. I get the, some passing ability. I think he's probably a better shooter than that, but there's just such a level of production here that's so low that I can't get past it. He'd be very clearly undrafted to me.
Fink, where are you on Bronny?
Listen, his dad's the NBA's all-time leading scorer. He can opt out of his contract. I agree with everything Sam just said, but there's no reason for the Lakers to not take him at 55 and just keep his dad happy and keep JJ Redick happy, and the podcast can carry on.
You got to protect the podcast.
Let's roll it out, everybody.
It's a great pod. I really do like the pod. It's phenomenal.
It is good. Really.
I would take him early in the third round.
Yeah.
Corey, where are you?
You know what? Just because there's a rivalry between the Lakers and the Celtics, I would take him at 54 to Boston. Just as a little wink. Honestly, though, like I think if Bronny was patient, I think there's something there. I mean, when I sat and watched him at Hoop Summit, like he clearly belonged. In that whole week of practices, at the game. I just think he is in a unique, kind of opportunity here where he, because of his name, doesn't have to be patient and he can force the issue a little bit. But like, as long as he's not getting thrown onto an NBA floor and like they allow the process to happen and he gets to play in the G League or sit on the bench, whatever, like I think there's something there for him. But like based on his production this year, and, obviously weird circumstances given, the heart thing at the beginning of the year, like Sam said, like we wouldn't be having this conversation if his name wasn't James. But I do want to say I think there's something there with Bronny.
Yeah, listen, I'd take him at 55 if I'm the Lakers, just to appease LeBron. What else are you getting at 55 at that point? You're probably taking an international guy anyway and stashing him or whatever if you're Rob Pelinka. So you take him at 55. And I understand what LeBron's doing here to some degree. He feels like the better path for his development for Bronny's is in the NBA and not in college. And after watching last year at USC, he might have been right. But to me, send him to Duquesne, send him to play for his buddy Drew Joyce, and let him have another year of actually playing a big role, seeing what he can do at a level that fits him. And then Okay, you got 2 years left, LeBron. That'll give you one. You want to do it for the final year. Let your kid be a little bit more ready-made to be able to maybe sit in the bench in the NBA at that point.
Well, that's everything that we needed on this show. A breakdown of the first round of the NBA draft and parenting tips from one Jeff Goodman. Listen, guys, I love, this is one of my favorite shows to do throughout the year. I appreciate you guys all being here. Sam Vecenie, Corey Tulaba, Adam Finkelstein, Jonathan Wasserman, and of course, Jeff Goodman. Thank you to Dagan Hughes. Great production. I'm always impressed by the way he can churn out those graphics as quickly as he does. So thank you. Appreciate you guys all being here. Check the link in the description if you want to find any of their content. I'll have the link to their most recent mock drafts in that description. So appreciate you guys being here, and I'll see you in a week for the 2024 NBA Draft Day 1.